piece of literature before he can actually appreciate the greatness of that literature. And that's why when we come to the Quran, many of us know the author. And many of us know the content. But not necessarily many of us know how to examine this content. You find, for example, many people will come and you'll ask them, what is the author of the Quran? They'll say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is the content made up of? 114 chapters, looking at those who came before Muhammad and those who lived with Muhammad, and exactly the need to understand society from a whole different range of levels. But when you come to the science of examining the Quran, this science known as the tafsir of the Quran is arguably one of the most important sciences in the world today. Because when you go around in the West today, you see, for example, CNN. It comes out in 9/11, or it comes out in July the 7th in the UK. You have the BBC and CNN coming out with a verse from the Quran. Kill them wherever you see them, as I mentioned a few nights ago. Or you will find another verse in the Quran, enter them as you please. Or you will find other verses in the Quran, marry them, especially those whom your right hand possesses. You find these verses in the Quran are taken completely out of context by some television stations because of the simple fact that they think they know the science of tafsir of the Quran. In the same way with our people, sometimes we get a verse from the Quran and we say, look, Sayyid Ammar, in my opinion, yes, I do not believe anything that you are saying here because this verse says this. But if I don't know what the prerequisites are for me to do any tafsir of the Quran, then I will begin to do tafsir of the Quran in my own ways. That's why the Quran always had to remain with Al Muhammad. Always. When Rasulullah said, I leave behind for you the Quran and my Ahlul Bayt. And for this fact, this is in Sahih Muslim, 2002 edition from Riyadh Publishers, you will find that it's on page about 880, the hadith is mentioned, which you can go and show anyone. The hadith says, Zayd bin Arqam was asked, what did Rasulullah leave behind in his farewell pilgrimage? What did he say? He said, Rasulullah stopped at a place called Khum. Rasulullah stopped where? At a place called Khum. Ghadir Khum. Yes, this is in Sahih Muslim. It's the latest editions. Go and get it. Go and show your friends. Let them understand what's going on. It says Rasulullah stopped at a place called Khum. He stopped there and he said, oh people, I am departing towards my Lord. I leave behind for you the Quran and my Ahlul Bayt. Once? No. Twice? No. 3 times he says, I leave behind for you the Quran and my Ahlul Bayt, my Ahlul Bayt, my Ahlul Bayt. The question is asked, Ya Rasulullah, who are your Ahlul Bayt? In Sahih Muslim it's written down, the sons of Ali ibn Abi Talib. So here what do we find? We find that within there Rasulullah has left us 2 which we have to hold on to. Because the Quran explains Al-Muhammad and Al-Muhammad act the Quran. You notice many messengers came but without a book. But no book came without a messenger. Always a book came with the need that a messenger is there to protect it. That's why when Umar ibn al-Khattab, when Rasulullah was dying, when Umar ibn al-Khattab said to him that the Quran is enough for us, Umar ibn al-Khattab was right. Because if Ali ibn Abi Talib is the walking Quran, then definitely he is enough for us to be alongside the Quran at all times. Umar ibn al-Khattab tried to separate the Quran. Yet the same Umar ibn al-Khattab, he tried to separate it from Ahlul Bayt. He would always say, if it wasn't for Ali, I would have been perished. So it shows you the need that someone was alongside the Quran. That's why when Muawiyah put the Quran on the spears, Muawiyah was virtually saying, I am separating every Quran from Ali ibn Abi Talib. I am showing you how it needs to be separated. The Quran, if it is separated from Al-Muhammad, every Tom, Dick and Harry can come and give a tafsir. And that's why you find the prerequisites to do tafsir of the Quran are quite a few which you need to understand. Number 1, I need to understand Arabic grammar. If I don't know Arabic grammar, then I won't know exactly the context of these revelations. I won't know exactly how to explain the verse about wudu, for example, unless I know that grammatically there is no way that the way we perform wudu is wrong. Grammatically, according to Arabic grammar, according to the way the verse is structured. Number 1. Number 2, I need to know the history of hadith and the science of hadith. I have to know exactly, for example, that in the world of hadith, we have to know the chain of the narrators, we have to know the biography biography of the narrators. We have to know that there is a hadith which is sahih, a hadith which is hasan, a hadith which is muwaththaq, a hadith which is da'if. There is a classification which I need to know. I need to also know the culture of the people of the time. Because, for example, someone comes to me and says, Ammar, in the Quran it's written down that we don't need to wear hijab. There is not one verse in the Quran, they say, which says you have to put a scarf over your hair. Well, we said in a few nights ago what? We said that the Arabians already used to cover their hair. So the Quran didn't need to tell them to put a veil on. They were already doing it. The Quran said, draw your veil over your bosoms. Make your veil come and extend. So here's number 3. I need to know the context of the people of the time. Having known all of these, I need to know the science of fiqh. I need to know the fiqh laws given to us by Al-Muhammad. Only through knowing these do I then come to the 5th area, which many people are surprised that you need to know this. For you to be a Tabatabai to do Tafsir al-Mizan, or you need to be a Makarim Shirazi to do al-Amthal, you need to know the history of pre-Islamic Arabian poetry. Pre-Islamic Arabian poetry. Some people will say, what's the need to know Arabian poetry? The reason you need to know Arabian poetry is to gauge what words did Arabia use, which the Quran has also used, in order to explain certain concepts and understand the language of the time. Only then can I do tafsir of the Quran. Not I get any Tom, Dick and Harry in the communities or outside the religion of Islam who comes and tells me, well, in Surah 9 verse number 5, it says kill them where you see them. No, if you want to do tafsir, make sure you know the prerequisites. Know what the culture is, know the context, then do the tafsir. That's why in history, the moment Ali ibn Abi Talib was separated from the Quran, and the moment his sons were separated, you saw many schools of tafsir come out. So many schools came out. Everyone came with his own opinion. Everyone came with his own tafsir. As an example, you know the idea within the Sunni school, to give you one clear example about if you don't know how to do tafsir, and you don't hold on to Ahlul Bayt, you will go AWOL in your understanding of the Quran. In the Sunni school, there is 2 schools of thought when it comes to theology. One of the schools is the Mu'tazila, and the other is the Ash'arites. These are the 2 schools in Sunni Usul al-Din, not in Sunni fiqh. In Sunni fiqh, Abu Hanifa, Malik, Al-Shafi'i, Ahmad bin Hanbal, these are fiqh, schools of fiqh. They're not schools of thought. A school of thought is a school of Usul al-Din. In the Sunni school, these 2 schools, they have a big difference over one issue which they can't agree on Quranically. What is it? Does God have a body or no? One very big difference. Why? Because the Ash'arite school, they have the belief that God has a body. And they have a belief, just like how you could see the palm of my hand, you will see God on the Day of Judgment. And the idea of people like Ibn Taymiyyah, who used to say that God will descend from the heavens in the same way that I descend from the mimbar. They used to have this opinion, that God has body parts. You found the Mu'tazila, they excluded themselves from such opinions. The Mu'tazila said, no, God cannot be seen. There is no way you can say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be seen. So what then happened was that you saw 2 schools of thought try to interpret a couple of verses. The Mu'tazila, they were stuck over one verse, which nearly shook their foundations. What was it? In Surah Al-Qiyamah, there is a verse which says, وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ نَاظِرَةٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٌ. On the Day of Judgment, there will be faces looking towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Mu'tazila were stuck, because the Mu'tazila believed Allah cannot be seen. But the Quran is saying, on the Day of Judgment, there will be faces looking towards Allah. So the Mu'tazila, they came out with their own opinion. Look how tafsir is done. Instead of following what Al-Muhammad have said, because you've detached yourself away from Al-Muhammad, you're now puzzled. How do I explain this verse? The Mu'tazila says, وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ نَاظِرَةٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٌ. They said the meaning of the word نَاظِرَةٌ doesn't mean looking. It means to glance towards. To try and give a different interpretation to the verse. Now you found the Ash'arites, they came forward. The Ash'arites said, God has a body. But then they came forward with a verse which they tried to understand. Where they came forward, for example, they came forward with a verse, you come forward with a verse with them, where they looked at the idea that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the Quran, He cannot be seen. They came forward with many verses, which tried to show no, on the contrary, Allah can be seen. When the reply came to them from the school of Ahlul Bayt, the reply came to them, for example, from Allama Tabatabai, where he gives a great example about how you reply to these 2 schools. The Mu'tazila, what did they say? They said Allah cannot be seen. The Ash'arites, what did they say? They said, no, Allah will be seen on the day of judgment. Allama Tabatabai showed that sometimes you find people that when they're doing tafsir of the Quran, they have to understand that some verses of the Quran are muhkam and some are mutashabih. Some verses in the Quran are metaphorical. Some verses in the Quran are what? They are literal. So therefore, what he did, he once went with someone, he says, we went on a journey to Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, where many of the Ash'arites who believe that God can be seen on the Day of Judgment, they went there. One of the Saudi Arabian big scholars, he was there. He believed that God will be seen on the Day of Judgment. So he was, as Allama Tabatabai says, we went into the library. He says, when we went into the library, this scholar who was blind, he said, who's coming to my library? The reply came, a group of the Shia. He said, get them out of the library. Get them out. Why? He said, because these people, they do tafsir of the Quran. We have to take the Quran very literally. You can't do interpretation. So then at this moment, Allama Tabatabai